Hi there, welcome to season 1 of our mining series, and it is powered by Global Links, corporate training, and I'm your host, Sthembiso Phakathi. And this time we've got a group of colleagues, and we're going to start with introductions, and this topic is close to my heart because it is about workforce effectiveness, particularly in the sector. And I would like to get some ideas from my good friends here and how we can explore this discussion. Maybe let me start with Antoinette. Please introduce yourself, where you come from, and the work that you do.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be here. I'm Antoinette Roberts. I'm the CEO of Bridging Associates. We're a consulting firm that works in the HR space, but also in leadership and strategy.
Thanks, Antoinette, and welcome.
Thank you.
Bridge?
My name is Bridget de Gama. I'm a fractional HR executive, also running my own consultancy, also teaching at Wits Business School, doing a bit of public speaking, and generally just having a good time.
She does a lot of things, and I do know that. And you're my colleague at Wits, and
Yes.
we're doing good things, imparting knowledge at the business schools. That's very nice. And then last but not least, Sihle.
Yeah, Sihle Kamane, and I work for Exaro Resources as the culture and performance manager for them.
Great stuff. So all difficult questions about culture, there we go. Great, guys, and welcome. So this discussion is about workforce effectiveness in the mining operation specifically. But this is a broad topic, as you can imagine. And maybe let me start with Antoinette. When we talk about workforce management, and I'd like you to touch a little bit about what should organizations focus on, especially these days when we talk about upskilling, reskilling, and outskilling. Imagining this sector of mining, what kind of skills should we be talking about, and whether it's automation, augmentation, and those kinds of things? Is there trends that you want to start talking about when you talk about skills in the mining sector?
Yeah, so I think in the mining sector today, they are moving to a more technical way of working.
Yeah.
And in that, they also have, it's a difficult and dangerous area. So the environment's very different from other organizations. And I think when we talk workforce specifically, there's two big things that I'm seeing. The one is that upskilling. So upskilling the workforce, that has to be planned within the workforce planning.
Yeah.
Because when do we upskill them? If they have 24/7 runnings, when do you build in the skill set, and then making sure that the workforce that's still working is enough people for the shift that's running. Because of the dangerous environment, you don't want fatalities, tired people, overworked people. So I think it's very important because of the technology that they're moving to make sure that you build skills planning into workforce planning.
Into the workforce planning, yeah.
That's the one part. The other one is the shift working. So many times we don't consider the shift working and how many people for that specific shift. So I think that's the second one. And then workforce planning, the next one in mines, I think there is critical skills, planning, and definitely data science. That's upcoming in the mining sector, and working that into your workforce planning as well. So skills to me is very important to be considered when you do your workforce planning.
It's actually also developing, because the skills of the skill profile of the mining workforce is shifting. I mean, we'll talk later about AI in this program. I'm glad that you mentioned that. I'm going to come back there. Bridge, in terms of attracting and retaining top talent, I'm wondering, what's the skills pool look like for this kind of sector? I mean, I was talking to Sihle earlier around the split between blue collar and white collar workers in this area. But where do we find skills, and how do we make sure we retain them in this sector, you think?
You know, I really think when I look at the 4IR and what's going to be required, especially around this whole idea of Leadership 4.0, I think we're going to require a different kind of skill set. But I think it's incumbent upon all of us to be building those skill sets. So now we're talking in 4IR, we're saying with all this automation, all this technology coming in, there's a different kind of leadership that's required. Human-centric leadership.
Yeah.
And that's a combination of the ability to be adaptable, the ability to have empathy and lead with empathy.
Yeah.
And very importantly, also the whole idea of authenticity.
Oh,
Yes,
that's a
so
big one. Yeah.
the combination of that three results in human-centric leadership.
Yeah.
And I think all of us are going to have to build it in
Yeah.
our respective organizations,
Yeah.
because we haven't really been focusing on it to date. And now, the 4IR is
Becoming
here.
more urgent. Yeah, it's already
It's
happening.
more urgent. So we're going to have to adapt the way we acquire talent, because you want to now find people who are capable of this human-centric type of leadership. You have to do those kind of screenings in your recruitment processes. And then when you're building your talent programs and development programs inside your organizations, this is the kind of mindset and skill set we're going to have to be building for the future, because this is the kind of leadership that will be required for what's basically,
Yeah, I remember I gave a talk to your class, and then it happened to be
Thank you for that.
a mining company, and then we were talking change, but and you talk authentic leadership. How would you say we could help leaders in this sector manage and drive change, especially in the times of volatility and so much hype about AI and generative stuff like that? And are they really resilient to be able to be adaptive enough to drive change in this? What have you seen?
I think this is why, the HR leadership, HR communities need to be working on this now already. I think in many respects we have old modes in terms of the leaders we select and the kind of people we think belong in leadership.
Yeah.
And we actually have to be preparing the environment for this change ourselves, and getting our leaders to understand what will be required in the future, so that organizations and they themselves can be prepared for it. So it's a very interesting time, I think, to be in HR, because more than ever, I think that HR is going to have to play a leading role in this kind of transition. And I think the one thing that disturbs me just a little bit is I don't see sufficient conversation around this in the HR community. I know there's some guys at Oxford doing research on Leadership 4.0, and there are pockets of excellence out there.
Yeah.
But it isn't sufficiently, I think, being engaged with in the HR community. And I hope that HR thought leaders will step forward so that we can have these kind of conversations, so that we can start putting these plans into place and understanding what's going to be required.
There's going to be a lot of work, and I like the questions I got from your group around managing complex change, and I would like us to explore that later. Sihle, I want to involve you now around the skills gaps. What strategies? You're already in the industry. Are you using to close the skills gaps, especially for the semi-skilled and unskilled workforce? And I spoke the other day about upskilling, and as we automate and augment using tech, there are some skills that we're not going to need. Are you seeing stuff in the industry where organizations are upskilling those employees that are not going to make it, so that they are more productive in society? And how are you seeing the companies doing the skills gaps, closing and making sure that we develop people according to the demands in that mining operation?
Yeah, I think there is reasonable progress, but there's also challenges on the other hand. Why? Because if you look at the type of technology and the adoption, the adoption rate, and the way in which the adoption around technology and the relationships that we need to carve with labor.
Oh, okay.
So it's got to be, let's say, an inclusive process that people can see the value. Say, we're not going to be losing jobs, but this is helping us to be able to transition better. Now, if you take an example, if you are going to be introducing autonomous trucks
Yeah.
into your operation, you're not going to introduce them without having firstly identified the capabilities of, the current operators, so that when you introduce the truck, there's people that can operate the truck.
Of course.
You're not going to go external and then you retrench this.
What do you do with the drivers?
Yeah.
Exactly.
So I think there is that process that has got to be a consultative, structured, but also it's got to be realistic, because the business may have the target and say, we're not going to wait up until all of you are.
There's a deadline.
Yeah, so there's a deadline that we have to do this. We have sustainable goals that we need to meet. So I think this, for me, you've just spoken about the change process and the change readiness. This is critical. Very, very, very critical.
Yeah, I visited one of your mines in my previous job, and we were doing some work around autonomous drilling in this particular mine. And as consultants, we met with the executives on the mine, and then we asked them, how many of your drivers are excited about, driving a truck through a laptop? And by the way, this particular mine had about 27 drivers. And then proudly, the executive said, all of them must be excited. Who would not want to drive a truck from a computer? I happened to take a break, and then I went outside during lunchtime, and I met one of the drivers. I think I shared this example at the previous podcast. And then I asked the driver, how would you feel like driving this truck from an air-conditioned office in Sentin or somewhere in the world? And by the way, you can drive 3 trucks at the same time. He said to me, listen, I don't know where you come from. You look very young. You don't understand my job. I'm 48 years old. I've been driving this truck for the past 17 years. I want to be in this thing. I want to hear the sound. I want to smell the diesel. I want to feel the dust in my face. I want to be in the trenches with this thing. There's no way I can drive it remotely. So why I use these examples, we shouldn't take for granted that everybody's excited about technology or about remote working. So I like what you're saying about it has to be consultative. If the workforce isn't going to embrace it, we need to understand out of the 17 or 27 drivers, how many would be excited about driving this thing remotely? And what do we do with the ones that are not excited? Does it make sense? Yeah, carry on.
I think if I can add to that is what both of them said was the change. So the leadership and the skill for the future for leadership, or actually not the future today, is definitely the 3 things that you said in the human-centric. But leading change is becoming more and more important because technology is scary. Doesn't matter what your age is, it is scary. But we need technology plus people. Automation can't take over the world. We still need the critical thinking. But that example that you mentioned was so important in a change process because what do the staff? Get them involved early, as you said, and hear from them. So listen to what he's saying. He wants to feel and smell it. So what job can we give him to still do that, not in the truck, but still do that going forward, and then get someone else that's excited driving 3 trucks at the same time. So, and in change, we normally don't do that. We sit in a room or in a boardroom and we design leading the change instead of starting with the people where the effect of the change is going to.
Actually, Sihle in our previous discussion was talking about user experience or employee experience. And sometimes employees are excited by different things in the workplace. In this particular example, the driver says, listen, I want to feel this thing. I want to drive it myself. And driving it remotely is not part of my plan. And Sihle, before I move on to the next topic, are there examples where you, in your industry, you've actually implemented employee development programs, especially on the ground, where you can get maybe a 22-year-old young person and develop them and give them different skills, maybe take them from a specific plant and shift them to a different location and impart different skills? Have you got examples in that instance?
Yeah, there's this particular one that's been very key for us. And I think the testing of it, we had to, before we scaled the whole overall training rollout, we had to test it. Because we know this methodology where you test it in a smaller scale and you see how the people are.
It's like a pilot.
Like a pilot. We piloted this where we used the, what is these things where you put the glasses on and all?
Virtual reality.
Virtual reality.
VAR.
Yeah, the virtual reality was one of them. But then also the second one was we put some of the learning programs online, where we've got our central our central platform where all the specific it's like your training kiosk. You go in there, you choose, you click, you go through the program. So I think these are the two examples that we've seen, and then we've tested it with certain people. But I think the VR one, the virtual reality one, was very appreciated even by the elderlies.
Wow.
And maybe they started to experience this thing even before it becomes
because they can visualize it.
Because they can give the input and say, this one is better, and maybe you're running a safety training with the virtual reality, and that how do you drive a truck, an autonomous truck? Firstly, you give them the experience,
so that it's not theoretical.
It's not. It's not that you'll wake up one day you need to control this truck with your remotely. So they were able to give the feedback and say, this is good, this is great,
and this is not going to work.
This is what we believe is going to give us problems, because we ran the programs with different kind of groups.
And then they gave input.
And then you are able then to assess and see the feedback that is coming in from the young.
So actually design the program with them.
So that was the one feedback. But the one with where people can go and into the training platform, we call it MyNext. People are able to go in, click in at their own time, especially with the compliance stuff. We tell them, we give them the date, do this stuff by end of June. And people just do it before the end of June is done, because they are able to go and run the training. And then if you answer certain tests and questions,
and it's a self-paced.
You can come back to it the following day or whenever you get the chance to go back. And you don't lose your answers. It's
not a classroom thing.
It's not. So that is it's an experience on its own, where people are able to give you the fix. So we tested this and we found that there was a much better response, and people were more able to go and do the training, and it was best for production, because it's difficult for them to release people.
So they have to do it on site.
So they can actually do it at home,
even at home,
wherever they are. If you have a phone, you can actually do it on your phone.
Okay.
Or if you've got a laptop that can access our central
system,
our central network, you can log in and you can do the training at your time, not when you are pressured, maybe just for your shift and so forth. And then you can take multiple days to complete it, and it's okay.
As long as you do it by the deadline.
You have a deadline, you learn, and then you do your assessment, everything is done.
That's interesting, because you guys remember many years ago, we used to have training centers in all kinds of operations, and where people go to a classroom, there's a facilitator, and now we just push the stuff on a platform. There's little videos, there's animation, all of these kinds of things. I like that idea.
But I like the idea of virtual reality and that experiential type of exposure. Because, in the example you gave, I actually would worry about a worker like that. Because I think what's going to happen is, with the short cycles, evolutionary cycles of the technology coming in, if you're not adaptable, if you can't learn quickly, unlearn, relearn very quickly, you could be left behind. You know what I mean? So
And people learn better by doing and by actually saying this. That's why
Yes.
AVRs are very powerful, because although it's augmented, but it's almost reality as you can. And I like what he's saying. You can provide input and say, oh no, in our life this is not going to work.
yeah. But also, if maybe that worker that you encountered could have that kind of experience,
You see now, yeah.
you could have a
It was
different
AV.
sort of approach to the whole thing. I think, because
won-
I just would hate the idea of people being left behind.
Yeah.
And I think what we need to be doing, and with your expertise in change management, is we need to spend a lot of time preparing the mindset of our
Yes,
employees.
yeah.
If they're not going to be adaptable and change ready,
Yeah.
I think it's
They're going to be irrelevant. Sorry,
Yeah.
Antoinette, we interrupted you.
Yeah, I wonder if even if a virtual experience would be good for that person you were talking about, because he said, I want to smell the diesel. But
Yeah.
he's been an expert. He said, I'm 48 years old.
Yeah.
It was his life, and that's what he enjoys. We can use his expertise for the younger generation. So how do we use him? Because I think that user definitely not going to drive
because it's checked
a
out.
truck.
It's checked out. I even said, get a person with a grade 12, train them to do, but how are you going to use this skill, this institutional memory from this guy?
Yeah.
Because he just said to me, listen, give me my VSP, give me my pension, let me go home. I'm not going to drive a truck from a computer.
Yeah,
But
so
I like
we
what
use
you're
him
saying.
differently.
Can you repurpose that kind of skill to be either coach these people or do something else? Because he says, I'm not going to do it. That's nice. Guys, I want to shift on this thing around building competency. When I was at Deloitte many years ago, we used to talk about moving from jobs to skills. Anyone can answer. What can companies, especially in this sector, do to show that when we move from jobs to skills, you can actually cross-pollinate across departments, across divisions, and even across operations, as opposed to you looking vertically in a job? What can be done to build a workforce that can move freely across boundaries? Anyone?
I'll try and take
Go ahead,
that one.
yeah.
I think the issue of talent mobility
Yeah.
is one aspect of it, where we have an idea of moving people around, but also the issue of exposing people to different kinds of experiences, where they can learn, but then also demonstrate the learning. I think that's one part, and creating an environment that is able to give people that opportunity. I think at some point, as we were discussing, we spoke about an HR person that could go and head up finance.
Yeah.
Or a finance person that can head up HR, for example. And for me, I see this culminating into the ability to move people around. And even if you, even if you've been with the business, let's say for 12 months, but you're gonna move, and as a condition of employment, you shouldn't be stuck in one particular spot. You should be moving as part of the condition, and we should be making
That's
this,
exponential learning.
yeah, because from the 24 months that you are with us, you would have learned the finance, you would have learned the HR, you would have learned the marketing. Come 36 months, you would have also been, because you've been
Absolutely.
moved around.
And growth is not always vertical.
Yeah.
So you can grow this way. And I think we should promote that.
Yeah.
Antoinette?
Yeah, so I think it starts with culture and having a learning culture in the business.
Okay.
And the platforms are making it easier for us.
Absolutely.
So if the platforms are there and I can self-study, then I can go and study another skill. I don't have to study.
Yeah.
And what you said is cross-functional projects.
Yeah.
So an environment that has that cross-functional project. So there's a project and I go into that project, but I'm not the HR person in the project. I'm now the project manager in the project. So I think that's easy. In a company that I worked for before, they had the cross-functional projects, but they also had almost like a trainer. So I would go learn a skill, and then to come and apply it back at the work, I also teach the others the skill. And that created that culture of learning.
very
So now I'm
exponential.
proud because I know the skill and I can teach the others. And now all of us has this skill. And another one learns another. So we were like a cohort of people learning different skills but teaching each other.
And it creates an ecosystem. Yeah, it's a pool of skills as opposed to just skills sitting functionally in silos. You want to add anything?
Yeah,
Rich?
I do know that some companies are adopting this whole concept of the talent marketplace.
Yeah.
So the talent marketplace would live through technology and basically consist of a cohort of people with special skills, for instance. And let's say you're running a project and you need a particular skill for your project. You would then go and look in the talent marketplace, get that talent on board for your project, deliver on your project, then release the talent so that another division.
That's the mobility he was talking about.
Yes. So some companies are running the concept of the talent marketplace, and then you just do your searches, on whatever piece of technology is available, find the skills that you need, deliver on what you need to deliver on, and then release the resource for somebody else to use.
I like that, Sometimes we talk about, talent ecosystems or workforce ecosystems, and I think progressive organizations are basically hiring for skill as opposed to hiring against a job. So they would say, instead of advertising for a job, you advertise for a set of skills, and those skills could be used anywhere in the company. And I like that. I want us to talk about automation and technology. How do we create balance, balance the need for automation and tech at the same time promoting retention? Because he and I were talking earlier about skills displacement, because organizations are so threatened by technology and automation, particularly in the mining sector. I was telling him that I had the president of the union called AMCO, Mr. Matunjwa, saying that our constituency are here to stay, and this company can't fire them because they need us. So I want to ask, maybe let me start with you, Sihle. How do we make sure that automation and technology doesn't become a threat to the workforce, because we have to retain those skills inside the companies?
Yeah, I think we've touched on it. A large part of it, as I say, it's a consultative process. There should be a clear program, and people, at least from a change management and the buy-in and all those type of things. I think the change piece is essential, but the participation of the, let's say, business, labor. There has to be that integrated participation.
Yes.
Why? Because if you are running a program that is one-sided, you're going to get resistance on the other side. And if labor is resisting and saying, no, we're not buying into this, clearly for me, there's something that the partnership had missed. And how the understanding of maybe how this thing is going to work out, and maybe just the intricacies of how the implementation is going to be. So the relationship between the key stakeholders here and how that is being represented, and the demonstration of the outcomes and the results and the benefits, and how perhaps the transition will be managed.
But would you say the leaders in this sector particularly are very much open-minded when it comes to talent retention? And we spoke earlier about creating an environment where people shift from function to function, or are they still siloed in their thinking? You've been in the industry for a long time. Yeah. What's your sense?
So I suppose there is a risk. There's always that risk that is available, where people are just averse in terms of anything that is new, and there's fear. And we know the process of
try it.
Yeah, we know. Even myself having to do the first podcast, it has been very, very difficult. But I've done it.
But look at you now.
Yeah, so you said, just go and do it. Yeah, so it's fine. Yeah. I think it's all in the experience, and I think we've said something earlier about the human experience, because that creates trust. And how do we leaders and maybe the labor and say business creates trust, a trusting environment
in the environment,
and that demonstrates to say, if we're doing this thing, it's not for the benefit of one, but it's for the benefit of everybody.
Yeah, all stakeholders.
If we don't become competitive, people are gonna go elsewhere.
Gonna be left behind. Yeah.
People are gonna go elsewhere, and you'll find that our products are not competitive. Because if we are selling a product that is about, let's say, 5 rand more, somebody else is selling the product at 5 rand less. Who would you go to?
And it's the same product.
It's the same product, same quality.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lose skills.
I think sometimes it's not an easy industry. I particularly think of, the minerals are where the minerals are.
Yeah.
Sometimes people have to make peace with working in very remote parts of the country or parts of the continent. So I think that we need to consider that and factor that in terms of trying to retain talent in this particular sector. I had a conversation with a friend who is very, very involved in mining, and she says, it's a type of sector where sometimes you don't have a lot of movement. You have people's the longevity in terms of their careers in a particular company can be quite extensive. So we have to apply our minds to that as well.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
How do you create a kind of environment where you almost have like new blood that is able to come in with new ideas, new ways of operating, etc., while at the same time just respecting the institutional knowledge that a lot of these employees have as well. But also, with a world in which there's a lot of sectors that are deemed to be a little sexier than mining.
Yeah, like the word sexier.
A lot of people think maybe Google is a sexier place
Sure.
to work than, a remote mine. So we must factor in that whole experience of the employee into our retention strategies as well. I think that's particularly important.
I like that because we spoke in the previous session around the shared purpose. And sometimes, even if you're in the mining industry, when you're passionate about doing that work, even if it's out in the remote land, and you're not going to be like a Google, but when the ecosystem and the workforce believes that we are unique, but we've got a shared common purpose, and then this is something special we are doing, maybe they're not going to want to jump to some. Would you agree with that?
I would agree with that.
If that DNA is very unique.
It is, but what are you talking about? Gen X?
Perhaps.
The millennials? What about Gen Z?
What about Gen Z?
You think they have the same?
They're going to want to move.
That is why I'm thinking we must think, I think, very creatively. Also in terms of preparing for the future.
Yeah.
Because Gen Zs are different.
They're looking for different things.
Yeah, it's a different kind of generation.
Go ahead, Sitle.
Yeah, I just want to add on what she has just touched on, because it's very, very crucial to understand.
Yeah.
That if you're talking about working for a mining company that's got operations in Zambia, somewhere in the Bundos, there's got to be something enticing, which we call employee value proposition.
Okay.
And that proposition is not always the same. If you are working in Sentin head office as an executive, it's different as you working in a mine somewhere in Kuruman. But there's got to be flexible employment models and say structured benefits, because we tend to have these benefits that everybody gets a same glass.
One blanket fits everyone.
Everybody's going to get this bottle of water. It tastes the same and what have you. You should be fine when you are thirsty. But someone wants water
Brandy.
with ice, water with ice and water with lemon. But somebody
And
wants the
something
sparkling water. But someone wants still, but it's a sparkling water without no sugar in it.
Yeah.
So we need to understand, but all of it, it's water. So we really got to be able to see how we can facilitate. And sometimes other people don't want to work there for the full month. I'll be there.
They want to move around.
For 3, I'll be there in the remote for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
But then come back to Joburg and have time to party. So my contract must be structured in such a manner that it really is able to, and my benefits are structured in such a way that it accommodates my lifestyle.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
I'm glad you highlight that, because Bridget is saying that, the different cohorts in an ecosystem are going to look for different things. Bridget, Antoinette, you are very passionate about DI plus B, and I think you and I have seen some of your postings or your posts on LinkedIn. How does inclusion or diversity have an effect on workforce effectiveness? When people or the workforce feels included, or do you think it has a positive effect on how they work together as a system? And other examples you can share with us how that works?
So you said I'm passionate. It has everything to do with workforce. Because the first thing is diverse and inclusion. If I've got different people around the table, different levels of people, the thinking is so much broader. So what she said, the Gen Z is coming in, include them into these conversations. I loved what he said about flexibility. No more compensation is one of the levers we pull to attract people and retain people, but it is becoming more and more important that the benefits are flexible. So yes, we have work-life balance.
Yes.
So we have work-life balance, but work-life balance for the guy that's remote is a week in Joburg. But in Sandton, it's not. In Sandton, it is every Friday afternoon, maybe. I can work from home or whatever. So it is absolutely hearing the voice of everyone around the table. And the ideas and the innovation that would come out would be far better. The culture in the business is going to be openness. So I'll be open to bring new ideas because I know that I'm heard, which drives innovation and which drives productivity or motivation, and motivation drives productivity. So to me, almost above all the other stuff, and I'm as passionate about purpose and shared purpose, because I don't think an organization today can exist without it anymore because of the different generations that we have in our workforce. But to me, almost just below that purpose is inclusivity, and it means inclusivity amongst everyone. The gig economy is growing, and what we spoke about earlier, the different skill sets. So I'm not stuck to a skill set. There's talent market, and I can be pulled into another project, not in my environment at all. It feels as if I'm part of a gig. Now, that would have never come out if there wasn't a cohort of people sitting and thinking around it.
Thinking about it, and you've got to include and invite different viewpoints and voices into the mix, because they're going to be very diverse, yes?
Yeah, and then you said, what is the example? Example was AI. So people scared of AI or just scared of technology? And how does that, and it was me in the HR environment, creating the job spec differently. So starting with creating the job spec, and where in that spec will be augmented with technology.
Exactly.
So there is really demanding tasks that can be done automatively and not manually, but already putting it in the spec, taking that complete fear away that I've got this, I've got headspace to think, I've got headspace for all the critical thinking, and the computer is going to do this.
And as we discussed the last time, and seeing AI or tech as a co-worker as opposed to a displacer or replacer of a human being. If you can view technology as a co-worker or colleague, and at Deloitte we used to say technology is talent. And just by calling it talent or co-worker, it shifts the mindset, yes? Exactly.
And I mean, the place that I'm speaking about is we had that in a very inclusive work session. And it was absolutely all levels of the organization. We even had the lady that makes the tea in there.
Wow.
Now, she's not going to touch the technology.
Of course,
and it was amazing of the ideas that she brought.
Imagine.
Because she had a young son that worked in that space.
You see now.
So we would have never asked her because she doesn't work with technology. So to me, diversity and inclusion is absolutely key to any shift and change. in the
Definitely.
work environment.
And it's got direct positive correlation to positive workforce effectiveness.
That plus innovation.
And
If you want to
innovation.
innovate in your company,
Yeah.
you have to have diverse thinking. Otherwise, we'll do the same thing
I want
every
to
day.
touch, thanks, Antoinette. I want to touch, anyone can answer this. There's been this big frenzy around workforce rushing back to the office for those that are working in head offices over the past 18 months or so. And some of my clients are saying, no, we've got a very strict policy, everyone in the office. Because we need to think about work and how do we measure work? How do we measure work outcomes? Is office a place or is it an input to the work itself? So anyone can answer this. How is that rush back to the office impacting the workforce performance?
I would think the CEO can answer.
The CEO. Antoinette, start with you.
So I'm quite against that statement. I don't like the fact that we force people coming back.
Okay.
And especially the new Gen Zs,
The younger ones.
they see life as important as work. So
Okay.
we have to be flexible. No longer can a workplace be a building. And the part that everyone's scared, what's going to happen? My people aren't going to be as productive. I want
If I
my
don't see
people
them,
to work
they don't
8 hours. Yes, 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
It is the way we measure that performance. No longer is it the input. Because measuring the input is not giving you
It's
the
activities.
results. Measuring the output. So I don't mind if you work from 11 tonight to 6 tomorrow morning, because that's when your energy is the most. I don't have energy
Yeah,
that
so
time of the
right.
night.
Yeah.
You work when you need, but this is the output. This is the time that I need it. And it must be there. And if it's not, there's consequences.
And I'd like to ask you, because you're also a tutor and a lecturer, how do we help organizations shift the mindset from measuring activities to measuring work outcomes? Really, is it that scientific for them to get it? That where and when and how you work is irrelevant. If I can give you meaningful work with clear goals, clear deadlines, clear milestones, everything else is up to you. Is it difficult to shift the mindset?
I think it's an important shift. I think it's a necessary shift. But I do think, as we shift the requirements of our leaders, I think some of that will shift. We'll
Okay.
have a different type of leader that will be coming in now to
Then-
what we have had traditionally. Some of that will shift. Some leaders have shifted. I mean, I remember I think it was Alexander Forbes. After the pandemic, they just said, listen, this building is, forget it. Nobody's ever coming back
It's
here.
just a building.
So some leaders are absolutely willing to make that shift. Gen Z is an interesting generation because, of course, the big concern there is that they don't have the sufficient amount of social skills. Because that was the generation that grew up with on social media.
Yeah.
As opposed to talking to each other directly. I'll
Like
just
that,
like
yes.
your post and talk to you that way. And then after that, they were hit with a pandemic and, the need to socially isolate. So what some organizations are doing is they allowing a hybrid environment, but requiring Gen Z to come to the office more often, which they hate. They absolutely hate.
Okay, yeah.
But they have to build those social skills because it's part of,
I'm glad you
community
mentioned that.
working and living.
One colleague of mine, a client of mine, said, I've studied a pattern of my manager. And when my manager is at the office, I'm there. Why? Because fear of exclusion. She says to me, that manager will only invite people that are in the office on projects, special initiatives, special activities. If you are not in the office, you're absent. So sometimes the workforce will copy what the manager does because they feel like I'll never be promoted, I'll never be given opportunities. But how do we demystify the fact that presence or visibility doesn't equate productivity? Is there something that we can teach leaders to say that actually you can include people that are even not here because you've given them meaningful work and they're performing against it?
Yeah. But how much training and development have we done of these managers who are now managing in a hybrid context? I think we were hit so suddenly by the pandemic that it was just a pivot under the circumstances.
Yeah.
And I don't think all of us have invested in actually, building
Empowering
a
those
new
managers.
skill set for these managers, building a new mindset. I mean, even like in a fully remote kind of environment, now the person who is, almost the personification of culture is actually the manager, because that's the person that the remote employee is interacting with most commonly. So I think we also have to take some responsibility for actually working with these managers in terms of the transition. We do know that people who have hybrid are more fulfilled and happier. So we must keep that, because if it's a value to the employee, it's worthwhile keeping. And a lot of organizations are also reporting that with hybrid, it's a more productive environment, because people are choosing when to work, when it makes sense to work, getting the work done. With fewer interruptions.
Yeah.
Carry on.
Sorry, if I can add to just what Bridget said, it's important we didn't train leaders to work in a hybrid or remote.
And they were not ready.
And it worked well when COVID just hit. Because I think there was a bit of a fear, so everyone worked harder. There was no line between home and work. We just worked. And we're expecting the same output than what we had when it was COVID. And it's shifting, it's not. The productivity is a little bit lower. It's not bad, it's lower than then. But the other thing is not only the training for the leaders, what businesses are also not doing is policies. So what does it mean, hybrid? So we're expecting them to have the output without putting the rules down. And that's the problem. So it doesn't work, but there's no rules. We didn't tell them how to operate. We didn't say, listen, if there's meetings, you have to be at your desk between those hours. We'll put the meetings in those hours. Because now if I like to work from 11 to 6, but I also need to interact with the people at work. And then the third important thing is engagement. So how are you structuring your engagement strategy so that doesn't matter where you are, I have the same experience. What you said, now if I'm not in the office, I get overlooked for the important projects or the training or whatever. How do we change that with a culture of engagement and a engagement strategy? We haven't shifted those three things. So we didn't say, now we need to train leaders how to do that. We have to have policies in place of what does hybrid or remote mean and how do we change our engagement strategy. We didn't. We're just expecting people to shift.
And also we were saying earlier with Sihle that leaders think that they are immune to upgrading their skills. They're just going to, everyone, every time we talk about upskilling, we look downwards. It's not me as a leader. We must upskill the workforce. Also, I think that there's this belief that cultures are built in the office. People talk about connection. People talk about connectivity. It can only happen in the office. If I don't see you, I can't connect with you. I don't know who said that, but a lot of clients feel it. For us to be a unit, or to be like something that's together, we must meet in the office. And to Bridget's point, we need to find a way to test if our managers actually are getting the right skills to understand what hybrid means and how to move to measuring activities to outputs. The last thing, we're going to close now. I want to talk briefly around shaping a culture of continuous learning. Anyone can contribute now, because whether you're in the mining sector, in operations, or in the head office, sometimes culture of continuous learning has to start somewhere. Where does it start, and how does it look like? Anyone?
Yeah. So the culture of learning, I think it's it's a personal thing.
Okay.
It's like the change that you want to see. It has to start with you, firstly. But the environment is critical in terms of allowing people to self-discover. Self-analyze and be able to understand their gaps and what have you.
Sure.
So that I can be able to say, okay, I'm missing this, I'm missing that. Identify my own gaps, but also let me go and address. This is how I'm going to address them. think that's really critical. There is a supporting environment which comes in with coaching or maybe with feedback.
Yeah.
Because feedback is a gift. And then when you get that feedback, it depends. Because anyone can say it. We can say the same thing, but you receive it differently. So the art of giving feedback for people that requires to shift their learning experience to the next level, it requires an environment that is some kind of an environment that is enabling towards that. Yeah. But personally, my view is that it begins with self, and where you're starting to understand where your gaps are, because my development does not depend on my manager. But my manager is also important.
You can initiate it as an employee.
My manager is still
Definitely
very critical, because if he doesn't approve, of all of these things, then I'm having a challenge, or I don't get the time, or I don't get the leave,
the opportunity,
there is an opportunity, but I'm not given time off to be able to go and attend to certain things, or be exposed to on the job. Because training is also stuff on this. It's different. It's not just me going into the university. It's also on the job. It's also coaching. It's also learning from other teams, or getting involved in the projects, different projects that you were talking about. That will be able to unlock certain gaps. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I like the idea of coaching, mentoring, and job shadowing. Bridge, you want to add continuous learning? Any ideas?
I think that probably the most effective thing you can do is create a culture that encourages continuous learning. Because if your culture is the way you do things around here, I do agree with you quite a bit in terms of the role of the individual. Because I really think that, I think it's a dangerous thing to give your power away to an organization or a manager in terms of your development. And now we're finding we're in a world where knowledge is accessible in many ways.
It's everywhere.
Yeah, a lot of the leading universities are now putting their course material out there online. You can find what you need, but you've that self where the individual comes in, that drive, that sort of like lust for learning and growth and development.
And just being a bit hungry.
Yes. So if you have a combination of an organizational culture where that's what we are. We're about continuous learning, and you must take responsibility for yourself. As an organization, we will provide the tools, we will provide the courses, we will provide, but the motivation must be internal.
It should be.
I think that
it should not be just imparted on you.
Yeah.
Anthony?
So I agree with both. It is a self-awareness, but I think from the organization point of view, they must talk about and make the employees aware of what's the opportunities when you learn. So when you learn and when you upskill, here's all the opportunities available for you. It puts a little bit of a hunger in everyone to want to. And then definitely self-awareness. I tell many people, no one owns your career. You're the only one that owns your career. They open the platforms for you, or they do the approval for you, but you own the career, so knock on the door all the time. So it's definitely the self. I do believe the culture of learning is important. If the organization doesn't create that, people won't want to learn. And I think reward people for learning. If you reward them, more people would want to. Showcase the people, showcase the learning that they've done. Because some organizations has people, and I've met many, that they're the first person in the full family that even got just a course. Never mind a diploma, just completed a year course.
So and I like that, because you can reward them differently. And I was giving a workshop last week around incentivizing effort and performance. And I said that people want to apply acquired knowledge. So you can even reward them by giving specific projects and initiatives where they're going to use those skills. It doesn't have to be money or voucher or anything like that.
It's on the job.
It's
on the job reward, or just having a ceremony and giving them a certificate. It's just you've got it. You've made it.
But largely giving them opportunities to utilize those skills. Last question. And
I just thought of a lovely example of a friend of mine who he was a pilot before the pandemic. So that's what he did, and that was a passion of his. He loved it, and then the pandemic hit, and he lost his job. He couldn't be a
Wow.
pilot.
Wow.
So he had to go back to the drawing board now because, I mean, he's got kids, he's got responsibilities. So he went and studied as a data scientist.
Okay.
And we know there's a scarcity of them out there, and everybody's
Yeah.
looking for them. And now he's a very successful data scientist.
Wow.
But, you know, having that internal drive to say, okay,
Yeah.
let me regroup, let me go out and do what I need to
Try
do
something.
to acquire new knowledge and skills. That's
Yeah.
what you need.
And actually, it's not just a draft, there was a need.
Yeah.
So how
So
does
there was
organizations
demand.
create a need for people to want to study?
You want to study, yeah. And I like what you were saying, that starting today is not through a university or through a college, and then there's so much free knowledge and programs online that you can. But if you're not going to pull and drag the individual to an online course, they must want it.
Yeah.
And they must be very hungry, to your point,
Yeah.
to want it. Guys, we've run out of time. We're only warming up now. And and the time is gone. I have so many questions to explore, but I think we're going to have another follow-up discussion because I was saying to Bonke that the next series we're going to explore so many things around talent management, succession planning, as well as leadership and culture, and I wish you would be able to come back and share your thoughts with us. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. I enjoyed this, and 40 minutes and 50 minutes just went by so quickly. But thanks for your contribution.
Thank you.